Well, we had a very fruitful deliberation, and of course, it's a technical subcommittee of a committee, and at the level of our committee, we have reached near consensus, and it is our hope that by the time we get to the plenary, we'll have a complete agreement, and maybe from there, the media can start their job. But as it is now, I think we are better off than we were before the technical committee.
The meeting is not ended yet.
The technical committee is over, and of course, it's a tripartite committee. We've struggled to reach an agreement, at least between the government and the organized private sector. We are still engaging the organized level, and I'm almost confident that in a few minutes from now, after the plenary, we would have reached a concrete agreement. A technical subcommittee was set up by the Tripartite Committee, and with me as the chairman, and we have to look into the issue at stake very deeply. And after a very wide consultation and with critical stakeholders, both the organized private sector, the organized labor, and representatives of government, we were able to arrive at a conclusion. First of all, it's a meeting of three parties, and among these three parties, two parties have agreed that 62,000 should be the national minimum wage that will be recommended to the president for further legislative actions to National Assembly when forwarded to them. And the Labour is saying that they would like to have 250,000 as the national minimum wage. Look at the global picture as it is today. Both the economic realities of the day, the capacity of government to afford and sustain such expenditure is very dim. So we were able to agree, two parties, the government and the organized private sector, as it was in 2018. Because in a meeting of three parties, once two agree, the two becomes the majority. So when put to vote, the two parties have agreed, like other two parties agreed in 2018, when organized labor and organized private sector agreed in 2018 against the government position of 24,000 and 30,000 was adopted. So this 5 years after, in this instance case, the government and the organized private sector have agreed on 62,000. So it means that as it is, that the majority position is that 62,000 should be the national minimum wage. However, all these are going to be a recommendation to Mr. President. And Mr. President will in turn forward the executive bill to National Assembly for legislative action. So I think it has been a very successful day. Among other things achieved today is that the apprehension in the country, the anxiety in the country, by this agreement has been relaxed, and everybody is now meant to go about his businesses without any problem. It's a recommendation to Mr. President. When this goes to Mr. President, we will continue the conversation. Consensus building is through dialogues or discussions. I will continue the conversation, and we will work hard because we all have to make sacrifices for the interest of our country, for the unity of our country, for also the government to focus, and to face the job of governance. Nigerians have recently witnessed a lot of hardship occasioned by some economic policies that is meant to stimulate our economy and recover our economy. So we are going to make sacrifices. But above all, whether you are from the organized labor, whether you are from the organized private sector, whether you are from any tier of government, we need the cooperation of all of us. So collectively, we can serve our country.
In 2018, it was the other way. The organized private sector and the organized labor recommended 30,000 as minimum wage, while the government side in the 2018 recommended 24,000 naira. And that was the recommendation. You could clearly see that two figures went to the president as a recommendation for his consideration for onward transmission to the National Assembly for it to become a law. That's exactly where we are. And all along, I don't know whether people have clearly understood the mandate of the Tripartite Committee. It is to recommend. The Tripartite Committee has no powers whatsoever to approve, but to recommend. And the recommendation today came as a result of deeper understanding and deeper studies of all the economic indices, the current inflation situation, the state of the economy, affordability, ability, capability, sustainability. Caution had been displayed all through, so that a figure that would further throw the country into confusion is not announced. This is because if any party goes into an agreement of a figure that it knows from its sources it cannot afford, then it's going to create another problem. But I thank God that all wisdom came together and that the recommendation to Mr. President is going along the direction that you have just heard from His Excellency, the Governor of Imo State, who played a very critical role in mediating this process with his colleague, the Governor of Kwara State. So we thank also the members of the media for the patience. And we have no complaint the way the media has been reporting this exercise from the time we started. My apology is that I have been approached several times as the chairman to talk, but the civil service in me will not allow me to talk until we come to a day like today. The work of the Tripartite Committee started 30th of January. That's about 4 months now. And the process has been tedious. But because on the day of inauguration, we have assured His Excellency the President that we will do a very wide consultations and stakeholdings with all broad spectrum of Nigerians. And exactly that was what we did by conducting about 6 zonal public hearings. We had about 12 plenary meetings. We have too many subcommittee meetings, culminating into the last day of yesterday, where we constituted a few technical committee to bring out all the details, particularly looking at the macroeconomic environment, looking at inflation today, all in a bid to be able to arrive at a point of affordability, sustainability, and ability to pay. The desirability is everywhere. Government is desirous. The private sector is desirous. Labor is desirous. The desirability is not in question. But those other indices, like I said, from the current economic situation, the inflation, the situation of insecurity in some of the local governments, that even to pay the last minimum wage, and all those things are what kept us this long to be able to arrive at the figures today. You could see even today, somehow, not that we wanted it, but 2018 had to repeat itself. In 2018, the committee, then the Tripartite Committee, made a recommendation of 30,000 and 24,000. The 30,000 recommendation was from the organized private sector and the Labour Congress, while the government side in 2018 recommended 24,000. There was no an agreement in a single figure. So those two figures went to the president. This is because the Tripartite Committee is a committee to make recommendations, not to approve a new national minimum wage. We don't have that mandate. So that was why the recommendation came out for 62 as agreed between the government side and the organized private sector, while labor stood at 250,000. This is what is going to Mr. President, and it is expected that after his due consideration, looking at all those indices that I have said, His Excellency the President will now transmit it to National Assembly for legislation.
Of course, this thing has gone on for 4 months, so they've done a lot of consultations, they've done a lot of negotiations and then deliberations, and they came up with that figure. Remember that figure had been on like 60,000 last time, 2 sittings or 3 sittings ago, and then came back and then topped to 62,000, and I said that's a benchmark. Okay, so for them to accept that and to bring that forward, including the organized private sector, for them it's sustainable because they agreed to it. So I believe that that's what they can pay.
We reconvened on Tuesday. So having reconvened on Tuesday, so we started the conversation. But we had to break into a technical committee yesterday. So those committees started crunching the numbers. So they had a meeting yesterday. They also had a meeting today to look at data and to look at where the numbers are, with the expectation that both parties will be able to come as close as possible. So having looked at this data and all that, the committee made a recommendation to the plenary. So the plenary just sat and to look at the report of the committee and made further input into it. So we've done all that, and we were not able to align to have a single figure. So what has been done here is that the government side and the organized private sector came up with the sum of 62,000 naira as their recommendation to Mr. President. But from us, from organized labor, we felt that with the hardship in the land, with the difficulty in Nigeria, and with what our members are currently passing through, that the workers deserved a better minimum wage than 62,000 naira. So having looked at all these, we had to calm down. Initially we started from 615,000 naira, but we removed close to 150%, precisely about 146% from our initial submission, and today we are making a recommendation of 250,000 naira to Mr. President for onward transmission to the National Assembly. So that is where we are today.
Gabriel.